The Missouri Tigers have struck gold in the portal, and it's got them on track to have a chance at the SEC title game.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a crossover edition of Locked On the Portal and Locked On Mizzou. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and host of the Portal podcast. We're going to be discussing all things Missouri Tigers and specifically how Elijah Drinkwitz and his entire staff have absolutely killed it with their portal additions. And it's going to be a lot of fun because this is one of the surprise teams of college football. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at Mazda. Like every player in college football, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, putting off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned for later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. We are going to be joined by my good buddy, Mr. John Miller, Locked On Mizzou. John, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Always great to be here, Brian.
This has been an extraordinary transformation. As somebody who also covers Locked On Seminoles, the Noles last year found a really good way to implode via the portal. They took the wrong guys, had locker room problems, guys quitting, guys loafing, disaster. Missouri went into the portal this year, and every team that took a bunch of guys and made me nervous. Maybe it's because I was too close to the fire with Florida State. Yeah. But as I said to you before the show, name me 4 players from any other team beyond Missouri that could do better than Pribula from Penn State.
Yep.
Very, very good quarterback so far, running and passing. Damon Wilson as an edge guy. You know what he's going to do. He still does. He had 7 pressures in the last game. He came over from UGA. You got, just Coleman. He's got 27 receptions already. He transferred in back to his home state. He's a St. Louis kid from Mississippi State. And then the running back situation. Are there 3 better running backs than Ahmad Hardy? Like all around? Conservatively, I have him top 5.
Yeah, production-wise, certainly not so far. He's kind of a dark horse Heisman guy at this point. So, yeah, those 4 guys, unbelievable. I was telling you, hey, I'd throw Texas Tech in there maybe. I think they've done a heck of a job in the portal. You know, they got that quarterback, their defensive line much improved. Like you say, really, Florida State is kind of the perfect contrast here. Just year to year, all of a sudden, hey, it looks like Mike Norvell has figured it out all of a sudden. The impressive thing about Eli Drinkwitz to me is what you're talking about here, what you're referring to, his ability to take guys from other programs in the portal and sort of seamlessly integrate them into what Missouri is trying to do. I think part of that is, of course, talent evaluation and also program evaluation. Does this person fit into what we're doing? The previously mentioned Ahmad Hardy, I can't think of another running back who you could have possibly gotten who would have fit more into what Missouri does in that outside zone type of running scheme. So to me, Eli Drinkwitz was a guy when he was hired by Missouri, I think all the way, late 2019, early 2020, somewhere around there. When he was hired by Missouri, he was thought of as this offensive guru who was going to call the plays and all that kind of stuff, and he did for the first few seasons. But he gave up play calling in 2023 and is then focused on just being kind of the CEO of this program. And, man, ever since then, everything has kind of taken off for this Missouri team. He is a guy who, for whatever reason, he seems to have the perfect skill set to be the chairman in the in the current NIL transfer portal era in which we all find ourselves.
Well, let me ask you this. You made a very good distinction. Missouri's done tremendous with the portal, but so is Tech. Is that the trend for teams that, like, Missouri's not going to beat out Bama and Georgia and LSU for 5-star defensive tackles very often.
Right.
So finding guys in the portal, in addition, you got to mind St. Louis and Kansas City, stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. But is that always going to be their approach, or what do you think, or has Eli even talked about it? How does he want to approach the portal? Because again, high praise here, tip of the cap. I think they've done a tremendous job.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, Brian, is you and I have talked a lot about Missouri's high school recruiting here over the past couple years, and We talked a lot about Williams Winery, for example, who was a big-time, top 5, maybe number 1 in the country, according to some people, type recruit. He comes to Missouri, certainly got a lot of money in the NIL world, but only stays at Missouri for 1 year, then transfers to Nebraska. Similarly, Keywan Lacey, another guy who's playing really well for Ole Miss right now, again, played 1 season at Missouri, presumably took some of Missouri's resources, obviously, to get him on campus. But now what you're seeing is Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz. Again, he gets here. A lot of the reputation was built on high school recruiting. Well, this past cycle, we're either 15th or 16th, depending on if it's us or Auburn in high school. But this past cycle, again, top 10 type of transfer portal class, it's quite obvious to me that Missouri has shifted its focus and decided, you know what, we're going to spend most of our resources here on proven players. Again, especially if we've proven as a program we can integrate these players fairly well, better than most, that's for darn sure. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. So right now, Missouri, other than maybe at quarterback, I think Gavin Sidwar is a pretty good prospect. Another Pennsylvania guy, by the way, along with Beau Pribula and Matt Zollers, a big-time high school guy from that area as well. I just think other than that spot, now Missouri's kind of looking more like developmental guys, 3-star guys that you can maybe keep around in the program for a while, high school-wise. And, yeah, let's try to just fit the gaps in the portal.
I think you just brought up something that is genius. It's one thing to sign a good player, high school or portal. Do they fit your program? And can you keep them once they quote unquote hit? What is your mark? Like, for those that do not know, Missouri has some cash. That's not a program that has a dearth of concerns there. They got pretty good NIL.
Right.
But you still don't want to overspend to keep a guy. Let's just use an example. This is the big question for every program, not just Mizzou. If you've got a guy in Pribula, obviously he's good. He's got another year of eligibility. How do you keep the guy behind him happy financially when he's not playing? It's almost an impossible and unfair question, but that's your task. Every program has that, but you got to apply that to other spots too. Quarterback's the worst because there's no rotating. It's just this guy's playing and you're not. How have they figured that out? Because it seems like when somebody gets hurt or when they rotate somebody in, it's I don't want to say seamless. Like the guy behind Damon Wilson's probably not Damon Wilson.
Sure.
But I mean, how are they keeping all these guys healthy and happy? And just like everything working together. If they do have an injury, the guy comes in, he's been pretty good. What's the gift there?
Well, as to keeping them healthy on the defense so far, Missouri's really been able to just rotate a ton of bodies in and out. Obviously, the South Carolina and Kansas games were much more competitive, but still, I've just been impressed with Missouri's really shown off its depth, in particular up front there, I think. I mean, like you said, Wilson, 7 pressures in that ball game. I think Missouri as a team had something like 27 pressures, or just a wild number against what probably was among the certainly better pass protection unit than Louisiana or Central Arkansas, that type of deal.
Yeah, and then you look like here's some of the numbers for Beau. He's been just very consistent. Now he hasn't been asked to throw the ball down the field much, but when you're 47 of 51 on short pass, that is insane. I know they're short passes. That's over 90%. So it goes to that side of the ball too. Pro Football Focus numbers here. I mean, his grades, they're pretty consistent. I'm not going to say he can or can't really throw the ball down the field a whole bunch, but out of his 11 passes down the field, 4 have been graded as quote unquote big time throws by PFF. That's a good sign too. So let me dive into that question a little further. Are you surprised not just how accurate it is, how timely Beau has been, like critical moments, or was this kind of what you thought based on the camp news before the season began?
I was pretty bullish on Beau coming into the season just based on, frankly, mostly just a second half comeback where he had to come in. Drew Aller got injured second half against Wisconsin. I thought what I saw from Pribula was very encouraging. I thought he looked accurate, good decision maker, all that stuff, but he's definitely been even better than I could have expected for a guy who has such little experience. Again, almost very little tape that's even really evaluatable. if that's even a word, because, you know, it's great when you come in and run a design quarterback run in certain situations, but that doesn't tell me a lot about who you are as a player. Again, I'm impressed with Missouri, who is able to find Pribula. I think he fits perfectly into what Kirby Moore and Missouri want to do, which is kind of a ball control type of offense that throws a lot of screen passes, a lot of shorter type of passes that you want to be obviously very efficient on, 75, 80%. Beau's doing it, and even though Missouri hasn't chunked it down the field too much yet, they've still shown the ability to do it. I think Marquise Johnson remains an elite deep threat in the SEC. I think, especially with that run game that Missouri's established, I think that play action, passing type deep shots over the top are kind of there for the taking. Hopefully Missouri has got them in the bag for the Alabama game and moving forward.
Well, I think that they've done a great job. But they got UMass this weekend. They got a bye. Then they got Bama. Then they go to Auburn. It gets real once you start playing. Like every game after that is important.
Absolutely.
I do want to throw out something, and we'll get into this in the next segment. I think the game that Missouri plays, correct me if I'm wrong here, they play at Oklahoma.
That's right.
That game right there, I think, is the teeter-totter point. If they can win that game, if they beat, let's look at it this way. If they beat either Bama or Oklahoma, I think they have a great chance to make the SEC title game. Everybody's going to get a loss somewhere along the line in the SEC. That's kind of how
almost
it works.
for sure, yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But Missouri's start and how balanced they are offensively and defensively, and I'll get into a few more stats here in a few minutes. It has been really, really impressive. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the stats. But, hey, is it possible the Missouri Tigers could go to the SEC title game? I believe that is a certain possibility. We'll talk about that next here on this crossover edition of Locked On the Portal and Locked On Mizzou. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP, Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most, so let's break it down. We already talked about Damon Wilson, and I'm going to stick with him. The defensive end for the Missouri Tigers had 7 quarterback pressures. If you go through stats on any kind of platform you want, it's hard to get that many pressures in 2 or 3 games when you play against a quality team, playing against South Carolina, playing against teams like that. Wilson has earned it. He is one of the best defensive ends in college football. So just like Damon Wilson from Missouri, DoorDash delivers for your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday that you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive with DoorDash. Promo good through November 18th. We are also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. NFL season's here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's for halftime scores, over-unders, traditional money lines, anything else that you want on the FanDuel app, you would get $300. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you once again for making Locked On the Portal and Locked On Mizzou a part of your day each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Brian Smith, host of the Portal, and John Miller joins me for Locked On Mizzou to talk about Missouri's incredible start and what I think is a very underrated team. I'm just going to go ahead and throw this out now. John, correct me if I'm wrong. What are they, 20th in the AP, something like that? It's way too low. Like, give me your take on that, because I think they should be top 10. Where do you stand?
I agree with you. I think they should be around 10th or something. That's kind of where I'm doing it. I think at this moment, Missouri, just based on not only, well, they're 4-0, they've won the games that they're, I wouldn't even say supposed to win, the games that they were mild favorites in. Okay. That's how I feel about it for sure. I agree with you. I think Missouri, for whatever reason, is a little bit underrated here. I was saying actually Indiana was one of the teams that's done, we were saying offline, I think the Hoosiers have done great in the portal, obviously, too. In fact, their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, was somebody that Missouri looked at pretty hard as well. But The reason I bring up Indiana is because it seemed like before even they blew out Illinois, they're getting a lot of respect, as they should, in my opinion. I just think they look completely different on both sides of the line of scrimmage. But it just seemed like, for whatever reason, Indiana was getting more respect than Missouri was, even though I thought they were in kind of situations with new portal quarterbacks, not traditional blue blood type of programs or anything, but it seemed like Kirk Cignetti and his program got more respect. And obviously that looks smart. My point was more about Missouri than Indiana. That's where I was trying to get in. By the way, just to clean something up from the previous segment, you were talking about the quarterback position for Missouri. How do you keep all those guys happy? Well, Sam Horn is a guy that, under normal circumstances, he transfers. Okay, he's a baseball player and had baseball-related injuries like Tommy John surgery. So there were a lot of different factors here. But there's no doubt that while he was backing up Brady Cook, Missouri was keeping Sam Horn happy. That's long story short. And now it looks like Pribula will be the starter not only this season, but in 2026 as well. I mentioned the true freshman, Matt Zollers. I think Missouri's going to do everything they can to keep him happy off of the field and on the field as well, because they absolutely love him. I know that.
That's important. If you have a quarterback that you're developing in your system, building chemistry with your own receivers, tight ends, offensive tackles, all that, eventually that's going to pay dividends in the win-loss column, more often than not.
And unfortunately for Sam Horn, he got injured immediately on his first snap of the season, broke his tibia, had a fracture in his tibia. So that's horrible for him, and I feel horrible for Sam. Long term, he'll be okay. Short term, this may be a slight blessing in disguise for Missouri, because now Matt Zollers gets an entire season of preparing like a real backup quarterback. I think that's going to be invaluable for him in the long term, even though short term, obviously, this is less than ideal for Mizzou.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. So let's just talk about big picture. We can include the portal and recruiting and all of that. Is there anybody else that I haven't mentioned? And I'll keep throwing out some stats here, like Hardy. I mean, he's 79 carries, 600 yards, 7.6 yards per tote, 6 scores. They're not a complex running team. Inside zone, outside zone, occasionally a gap play or something.
Right.
Here we come. Can you stop us? And I was watching the game last week. Drinkwitz was asked before the fourth quarter, how they interview the coaches now during the game, whoever runs the ball better will win this game. I mean, he was just A to B, like going into the fourth quarter, and they ran it better. So guess who won? You know what I mean? Like that,
right.
Their defense was good too, and the defense is top 25 in like pass defense, top 25 in sacks, top 25 in rush defense. I said this to you before the show, and you can apply this to several schools. If they wore the helmet that Texas has, the helmet that Notre Dame has, the helmet that Ohio State has, or Bama, et cetera,
sure,
Missouri would be ranked top 10 because their performance and their statistics back it up. So I ask you again, what other player or players do you think may be very important that we haven't already talked about? Coleman and all these guys are great. Is there anybody else we need to know about from Mizzou?
Well, my goodness, I think Josiah Trotter is somebody that, I'm almost I'm kind of kicking myself right now that we haven't brought him up already, since we were talking about transfer portal stuff. I mean, his teammates were just absolutely praising him after Missouri's performance against South Carolina, where they held the Gamecocks to negative yardage in the run game. And his teammates were basically saying, hey, Josiah Trotter, he's basically a one-man box filler. And I think Missouri, because of how good Trotter is, because of how good their run defense is in general, I almost think Missouri should be asking themselves, should we be being a little bit more conservative? Should we be playing more too high? Should we be being a little bit more conservative, just generally speaking, in the run game, because we're such the Great Wall of Columbia right now? Maybe be a little more conservative on the back end, because that's something Missouri's definitely got to figure out. They've given up, just too many big plays on the back end. Though what I think is interesting, big picture, like you were getting at, Brian, is when you talk about the run versus the pass, well, these days it's all about, hey, you get more yards per attempt passing than you do running, so let's just throw it every time, right? There's that thought out there. I think what people miss is how football's actually played. You have to move the chains to get down the field. And to Drinkwitz's point, if you can run the ball and you can stop the run, even against somebody like Lenora Sellers, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, he threw for over 300 yards again against Missouri. If you can't run the football, and clearly the Gamecocks could not, eventually you're going to face a 3rd and 8. Eventually you're going to face a 3rd and 12, and those are tough to get off the field on. You've got a really good pass rush like Missouri. So I just think this team just makes sense to me. They're playing complementary football right now, and this is what I was hoping they were going to do all season: run the ball, run clock, rely on that defense, and also have a really efficient passing game as well. So far, so good. This team is as good as I could have hoped.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when we come back, I want to talk about the guy that orchestrates all this in Drinkwitz. I have a couple of questions for you, Big Box, not just on this season, but how he operates everything, because it has been really great. That is next on this crossover, Locked On the Portal and Locked On Mizzou. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Moving the game forward for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, culture, and keep moving the game forward. And this is why I talked about Damon Wilson a lot in this show, Josiah Trotter. All the different guys on Missouri's defense have been just game changers. The entire defensive coaching staff for Mizzou needs to take a bow as well. They are dominant at the point of attack. They are physical, and they always seem to make clutch plays. And at home, Missouri's got a really great crowd, and that gets things rolling. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Mr. Miller, the question that I have for you is about Eli Drinkwitz. You mentioned earlier he's become more of a CEO. Obviously, it's working. Obviously, they have money too. Like you said, they're paying Zollers, they're paying guys. They do whatever they can. This is my prediction. It's probably not one that Mizzou fans will like. This is supposed to be a massively heavy year for college coaches to get fired, which always seems to be that way. I can't imagine that he's not going to get, his agent's not going to get phone calls. How far do you think they're going to go to keep him? Because I think he's going to be on the short list. Maybe Florida calls him. I have no idea. That'd be a hard job to turn down. I'm sure you understand what I mean by that. But whoever it is that comes calling, why should Missouri fans, A, appreciate him now? Because in my lifetime, this is the only extent they've been this physically dominant. They had some other good teams too, but in the last 50 years, Mizzou has not exactly been dominant very much. They're really good now. What do they need to appreciate, and what does the administration need to do to make sure they keep Drinkwitz in Columbia, Missouri?
Really, I think so far the administration has done about everything they could possibly do to keep Eli Drinkwitz happy. In fact, if you've watched Missouri this season, you've noticed, hey, what happened to the big Rock M Hill that they used to have? Well, they've taken it out, and they're building this massive north end zone complex, and then it'll eventually be back. Don't worry, all you Rock M fans out there. I know those of you who watch the SEC squad in particular know what I'm talking about, that inside joke. But the point is, I don't know that they build that thing if Eli Drinkwitz doesn't just simply say, hey, this is what I want. Go give me this $250 million thing on top of paying me, $9-10 million a year. He got another extension recently. I said he's the CEO of the football program. Heck, he might as well be the president of the entire university system at this point. He's the most powerful guy on campus, bar none, by far. I mean, Missouri really can't give him anything more than what he already has. And to your point about that Florida job, I understand why, of course, the perception is that, yeah, Florida's a better job. And certainly Florida has better tradition than Missouri. Obviously, they've won national championships, SEC championships. That's something that Missouri has not been able to do as of yet. Also, Florida has as you well know, Brian, they're an incredible recruiting base, better than Missouri, obviously. But there's a real risk to changing jobs, as always. When you have things going and rolling like you do right now at Missouri, why do I want to necessarily go to Florida where if things aren't going well after a year and a half, I'm going to just be the next guy they're looking to fire, because they're not exactly the most patient people down in Florida, understandably in a lot of ways. Obviously they have those national championships. I'm just telling you, Florida is like one more bad hiring cycle away from being in not the same place as Nebraska, because obviously the recruiting center is not comparable. But I'm just saying, at a certain point, all this idea of, well, we're Florida and we're entitled to be awesome every year. I got news for you. You got a losing record against Missouri since the Tigers have joined the SEC. So this entitlement here, I think we might want to pump the brakes a little bit. I think it's a lot more realistic that Florida is going to get a hot guy from the group of five, somebody like, Billy Napier from a few years ago. I just don't think, or an offensive defensive coordinator, somebody like that from an Alabama or something. But the head coach at Missouri, another peer SEC program, I just don't really see that happening.
I hope you're right, because I like it when programs like Missouri are up. It's one of the reasons why I started following college football, because it was so wild, even when I was a kid in the 80s and then in the 90s, and it's just never stopped. So it makes it great. I'm sure that at worst he's going to get a raise out of this.
He'll get a call. I mean, Jimmy Sexton is going to get a call from the Florida people. They're going to try to figure out if he's interested, and I don't blame him. They should. I just don't think it's ultimately going to work. Again, maybe Eli will get another couple $1 million a year out of it. That could happen for sure, and probably will. I just don't see him going to Auburn or Florida or something like that. I think it would really say in a couple years, if Kalen DeBoer's gone and Alabama comes calling for Eli Drinkwitz, okay, I don't know how he could turn that down. I'll be honest with you. But Florida, these places that have their own weirdness behind the scenes too, these administrations that are tough to navigate. Again, I'm not saying the Missouri administration would be easy for a new guy to navigate, but again, Eli's the king right now. He's kind of got everybody he wants to have in power. Some would argue maybe there was a power struggle with the athletic director, Desiree Reed-Francois. Well, guess what happened? She's in Arizona now. So I'm just telling you, he's got about everything he could want at Missouri. If he decides that there's something he can't get here that he can get in Florida, again, it's about the portal now. Is it in Drinkwitz, his philosophy? So is that high school basis as important as it used to be? I think that may be a thought from another era a little bit.
I agree. The Florida fans, it's an odd base. I've lived in Florida. I've dealt with it. I know that firsthand as a Central Florida guy for a while, Tampa and Orlando. And they expect you to win recruiting national championships too. That's not Eli's strength. I think he'd be better off at Mizzou. That's just my take, and I hope he stays there a long time. I think the more likely thing is he would try to go to the NFL if he ever left. And that's hard and impossible to predict what NFL – some of the owners of the NFL drive me nuts. I have no idea what they're doing in general with hiring.
Right.
So don't get me started on that. But
right.
John, I'll give you the last word on this. Should fans that aren't Mizzou, I follow the program. I've got family ties to Mizzou, and I'm curious about it, and I always try to watch when I can. What should fans that haven't seen Mizzou play yet, that are going to this year, what should they expect anytime they see the Tigers take the field?
I would just say really good execution and just good football overall. I mean, Missouri has done a really good job so far of just executing really well. You'll see the Tigers offensively, they're not a fast-paced unit at all. They take their time on every snap for the most part. They'll occasionally hurry it up, of course, but for the most part, they're going to line up in one formation and maybe shift to another and then put a guy in jet sweep motion. But a lot of it is just eye candy. Like you said, hey, it's usually just kind of a inside zone, outside zone, but with all the shifting, with all the jet motion that they, of course, occasionally hand it to the jet guy, just puts you in a lot of different binds. And impressively, again, for a team that has a bunch of new offensive linemen, a new quarterback, a new slot receiver, well, they all seem to be on the same page. And defensively, boy, a group that just flies to the football and really just tackles, plays good physical football. I think they're a blast to watch, especially if, you get tired of just, hey, spreading it out and throwing it. This is a physical kind of throwback football team. I think they're going to be a pain in the butt for anybody to play the rest of the season.
I agree completely. Mr. Miller, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Well, of course, Locked On Mizzou, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to them. And if you want to follow me on short form, well, you can do that too. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, anywhere on social media at Locked On Mizzou.
I appreciate it, sir. You can find the Portal Podcast wherever you get the same place with John, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all those places. And, of course, across social media, TikTok, everywhere else. This has been the Portal Crossover with Locked On Mizzou.